Fresh from the showcase here at SwissWatchExpo, we've got 3 Omega Speedmasters. These basically able to time just about anything you could possibly want to. So when it comes to manual winding chronographs from Omega, the first thing your mind is going to go to is the Moonwatch. And rightfully so. It's their most popular, arguably their most iconic watch in the entire history of the brand. But they did for the longest time make what was called Chronoscope Speedmasters, which they are brought back, and we have 3 beautiful examples of now. And this is a very unique chronograph with an incredibly hectic and busy dial. That's the one thing that all 3 of these have in common because of all the 3 different things that it is meant to time. And we have 3 beautiful examples here. They all share pretty similar design, and that's sort of just by necessity of what this watch does. So the first thing you'll notice, so much going on this dial. This is a pretty large 43 millimeter case, so it's actually a bit larger and a good bit thicker than the Moonwatch is as well. And you'll see that's rightfully so, because if they made this watch any smaller at all, it would be impossible to read. And in fact, a lot of people will probably find this watch very hard to read. So this is definitely an incredibly practical chronograph that's meant to time a number of different things. So what makes it a chronoscope is that most chronographs that you see will have a tachometer bezel or possibly a ring around the inside of the dial. And that is used to measure speed mostly. And that's going to be the most common thing that people with chronographs measure. It's traditionally a racing watch, and so speed tends to be the thing that you are most concerned about. But what makes the chronoscope different is that we have 2 other rings inside of here, which will measure different things as well. We have a telemeter, and I'm sorry, I'm spacing on what the last one was called, the telemeter and the pulsometer. That's right. So the telemeter is another ring on the outside, the furthest on the center of the dial, and that is meant to measure distance as opposed to speed. So the distance between 2 things when the chronograph is running. And then the pulsometer around the closest to the center part of the ring. Now that is meant to measure heartbeat. It was traditionally used by doctors, and so some old school doctor's watches you'll see from way back in the day would have only this scale on the dial because that was the only thing a doctor ever really needed to know while they were doing their job. So practically, and I feel this way about most chronographs, unless you happen to do these things for a living, it's probably not something you're going to get a lot of practical use about. I feel the same way about my chronographs, but they look absolutely stunning, and realistically, I think that's why most of us buy them. So let's talk about the aesthetics of this beautiful piece. This one here, I think, is going to be the most plain. This is going to have a silver dial on a steel case, but I love the blue accents here on the dial. You do get Arabic numerals around the outside, which I think is kind of, it might be a bit of a choice here because that does make the dial busier than it would have been if they had used something a little smaller or a little more subtle. Because you'll see these 3 different scales we have in the center are actually overlapping with the subdial registers here on the dial. We only have 2. We have the 60-second second hand, and then we do have the 12-hour counter here at 3 o'clock. That's going to be the one thing, another thing that all 3 of these have in common, and that's going to be something that I think is traditional to the chronoscope in general. And then 2 others that we have here. This is basically the inverse version of that, or the reverse version of this dial, with an all blue dial with the silver scales in the middle, Arabic numerals, hands all made silvered as well. I'm a little torn as to which one I find easier to read. They're all pretty jumbled, but I think you would have to train yourself to sort of use these interior scales here if you were planning on using this watch for a practical purpose. And then finally, one last one here, which might be my favorite color combination of all 3, because this is where you get the most variety. We have silver with red and black. So the subdials here are black in addition to the Arabic numerals. But then they made the inner ring of this chronoscope scale red, which I did think would be necessary. It would be impossible to see the overlapping part with the subdial. And again, I do love all the extra colors you get. Also, the chronograph hand here in the middle is a combination of red and silver, which I think is really unique and not something I see on a lot of chronographs. So I really, really love this. And now to go into the rest of the design as opposed to just the dial. Again, the case is a bit thicker, although definitely reminiscent of a modern Moonwatch case. The crystal is actually raised a bit more, and this is a sapphire crystal, just so you'll know that this is different from a Moonwatch traditionally in that regard. You do get an exhibition case back with all of these. This movement, a caliber 9908, is a manual winding co-axial movement, and you'll see it's mostly bridge here, but this is a beautiful design on the back, and they do expose a lot of the jewels here. So you don't get a lot of the inner working visible here, but I think this is a beautiful exhibition case back movement, even if it's not one you would traditionally maybe go for if you wanted to kind of see the movement in action. This one doesn't really do that, but it is beautiful all the same. And then this has a newer style bracelet here from Omega, a bit controversial with some of the people I speak with, but this is going to be the same bracelet that's on the new Moon watch. It's much thinner, doesn't really feel quite as sturdy as some of the other ones do, but I am sure they did not make a weaker bracelet than that. However, it does feel a little bit lighter because of the thinness there, and that is something that a lot of people have had have taken a little bit to get used to, but I still think this is a very well-made, incredibly well-constructed bracelet, just like the rest of this watch, just like any piece you would expect Omega that's making in 2022. And we've got all three of these versions of the Chronoscope here. So if you're looking for a really unique addition to your chronograph collection, or even if this isn't for you and you're looking for something that's a lot easier to read, we have a lot of that too, in a variety of brands, even if Omega doesn't suit your fancy, even though I may try and convince you otherwise. But give us a call, shoot us an email, and check out our new arrivals. We've got a lot we're still posting before the Christmas holiday, and a lot after. I promise we're not going to run out. So check us out, give us a call. We've got so much of this and more at SwissWatchExpo.com.